Hello, everyone. I hope this finds you well. I hope this finds you staying safe and nourished and socially distant, whatever that means in your world configuration of humans. I wanted to talk about something that I've been thinking about a lot, especially recently, is the why of sex. And I'm gonna clarify and get more specific about what I mean by that. But how I got there is, so when I do consent education and sexual assault prevention, one of the things that I often talk about is how unfortunate it is that in our society, often sex is framed as something that a person does to another person or gets from another person or takes from another person or scores from another person or worse, loses or gives up to another person, barf, right? And it's, really unfortunate framing because in reality, sex is something that is done with another person, right? And obviously, I'm sure to a lot of y'all, that's like, no duh, of course, absolutely. And I'm sure you can see clearly how that makes like a really important framework for talking about healthy, consent and boundary setting. And, if you're framing sex as something that is done with another person, something that is collaborative, then it's a lot harder to dehumanize another person and to, sort of bypass consent and all that really important stuff. But the other thing that has come up a lot in my experience in some of these conversations is the fact that a lot of times it seems like people are having sex, consensual sex, right? I want to talk specifically about consensual encounters. Sexual assault would be a whole other conversation, okay? So just when we're talking about consensual encounters, it seems that, there are many times when people are having sex for reasons that they don't recognize or reasons that really don't have anything to do with them, with their wants and values. So frequently I feel like this can look like, having sex for other people, basically. Not necessarily literally, like they're, even asking you explicitly to or telling you explicitly to, but, whether it's having sex for, one's partner out of a sense of duty or obligation or just fear that, if you don't, something bad might happen, or, having sex for your friends, by which I mean the expectations of a social group, whether they are real or imagined, having sex for these larger societal reasons or reasons that, again, really just exist outside of the self. And to be clear, sex is it's a social thing, all right? Sex is culturally constructed and culturally produced. So it makes sense, of course, that there is going to be a lot of influence in how we think about sex and talk about sex and therefore engage in sex from the communities that we exist in, the people around us, our partners, etc. That makes total sense. But what I think can be really distressing is that that can lead to a situation where people are engaging in sex that is not actually in line with their core values, by which I mean the reason behind having sex has nothing to do with what they actually want. So something that I'd like to encourage everyone to do is to get a pen and paper, get something to write with, or markers, whatever you enjoy writing with. And I'd like you to answer this question for yourself. What are, to you, acceptable reasons to have sex? And I want you to make a list. And I want you to make that list as exhaustive as possible. Don't stop at the first 3 that come to mind. And don't settle for, any reason as long as it's consensual, because I bet that's not totally true. The consensual part, yes, again, like consent, bare minimum, mandatory. We're talking about consensual sex, okay? What are reasons that actually feel acceptable for you to have sex? This is such I think, such an eye-opening and introspective and really important exercise. And when I did this exercise for the first time, it was really illuminating for me. And there was a huge range of reasons the more I pushed myself, right? Everything from, to demonstrate and manifest and deepen love for a partner, to because I'm horny, right? Those can exist together, but they don't always, and they don't need to. And so all that meant for me was, in the scope of my life, my sexual existence, at least for right now, as long as one of those reasons or any of the other reasons I wrote down was ticked off, when I thought about like a sexual encounter, then I could rest assured that whatever I thought about that sexual encounter, whatever else was going on, I could rest assured that I had no reason to have pause or anxiety or qualms about why I had actually had that sexual experience. And that's really, really important. It certainly was for me, because then the other thing that I noticed almost immediately was what wasn't on my list. A lot of which were things that had definitely been part of my sexual experiences in the past. Okay, so, some examples of things that were not on my personal list as acceptable reasons to have sex: to feel validated, to try to keep someone, to hurt someone else, right? Like, and I could go on, and that could be a whole separate exercise if you really wanted to delve deep into like what are not acceptable reasons. But I think it's really important to get really clear about that, because I've heard the term meaningless sex get thrown around in literature and in pop culture and in social media. And the idea of meaningless sex is actually so nebulous, because it doesn't take into account the fact that we are the ones that get to create meaning in our own lives. So there's no one-size-fits-all definition of what meaningless sex is, or what meaningful sex is. We get to create that for ourselves, as long as we're able to get really clear and really honest with ourselves about what reasons behind sexual experience actually are in line with the values that we hold in life and the values that, we want to move through the world living out. And again, I think if you try this, and if you really, try to apply yourself to this sort of honestly and expansively, the other really beautiful thing is you can surprise yourself with how generous you can be to yourself about what those acceptable reasons are. And that's also a really beautiful thing. And it can also be a living document, which is a really lovely reminder of where you were at a given moment in your life, and also a really valuable blueprint to track how you're sort of navigating your own sexual journey and roadmap, or whatever you want to call it. But I think that like really gets to the crux of this idea of how can we have sex that feels embodied, and in line with ourselves, like the entirety of who we are, and how can sex become something that we come to from a place of wholeheartedness, which is, I'm talking about within ourselves, irrespective of the partner that we're with, or, that we're engaging with, okay? Because I'm not equating this to like, sex that is based in love is therefore more meaningful. No, absolutely not, right? It all becomes about like, what kind of meaning do you want to have, and do you want to assign to your own sexual experience? Again, as long as everything is consensual, no one gets to tell you what is or is not an acceptable reason behind any sexual practice. So yeah, just something I've been thinking about. It felt really liberating for me when I did it. Also, your girl loves a journal. And I'm sure a lot of you do too, because you know what? It's quarantine. We're all inside. We're all getting in touch with the deepest, darkest, most inner workings of our mind. And if if you're trying to stay sane, then hopefully you're finding a way to channel that, not just spending the night drinking heavily. Although sometimes maybe that's what you need. Maybe that's just me. But yeah, get that journal out. Make that list. See how you feel. See what you come up with. It could be a really juicy thing to think about. Some fodder for excitement once we are all able to be a little bit more in community with one another. Okay, babes. Stay well. Stay safe. Stay curious and stay kind to yourself. Mwah!